Okay, so welcome everybody to the second of our activism series. So today we are joined with Polly Hallam, and she's going to be talking about her activism journey around the climate crisis and tackling that. So what the activism series is, I'll just go through quickly for anybody that hasn't been to one before, is a series of webinars which are designed by the Gen Z steering group. A couple of the members are here today, Mia and Stephanie, and it's to encourage young people to find out a bit more about campaigning and what it actually is like to be an activist for your cause. So I will pass over to Mia to do some introductions for everyone.
Yeah, so we're gonna introduce ourselves, and we're gonna we're gonna use an icebreaker question. So the question is, so your name, how old you are, and your favorite campaign that either you've done or you've seen that you're interested in and that caught your eye. So I'm Mia, I'm 17, and I think the favorite it's one that I've been involved in. I think it was a Reclaim the Night march that I did in 2017, and it was about women's rights to feel safe on the streets, and we did a march through town up to, was it the Students' Union?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just to help raise awareness for women who feel unsafe on the streets, especially when it's dark. So I'll pass on to Steph.
Hey, hi, I'm Stephanie and I'm 13 years old, and a campaign that I'm actually really interested in is climate change. So I'm really interested in seeing Greta Thunberg, someone who is very popular in that campaign, and the fact that she's such a young person but trying to make a change is really inspiring. So that's why I want to join in on. Shall I pass it to someone?
Yeah.
Okay. Ellie.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Ellie. I'm the project coordinator at Chili Pep, who works on this project. And there's so many inspiring campaigns for me. But I think, what's a good one that I can say? I think in recent years, Emma Gonzalez and the other young people in Florida who have been campaigning against weapons, being able to hold guns in America. I think they're amazing young people and really making a massive change in the world. And finally, last but not least, pass it on to Polly, who is here today to speak.
Yeah, hi. So obviously I'm Polly, I'm 18, and I think one really inspiring campaign that I can think of just off the top of my head is probably Extinction Rebellion, and how they block the whole streets just to show that climate change isn't something that we can put off, and just to get it kind of in everyone's faces, so they can see that it's important now, not just in the future. Yeah.
Fab, thank you. So so the floor now is yours, Polly, to talk a little bit about your activism journey. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, first I want to tell you about how I got involved in activism and kind of where it all started, because I haven't kind of always been an activist. So I think I heard about the first youth strike for climate in Sheffield on Facebook, and as soon as I had seen it, I kind of decided, yep, this is something I want to do, because I think I'd always been concerned about climate change, but I'd never really had an opportunity presented to me to do something about it and take action on all those concerns that I had until that moment when I saw that on Facebook. I kind of assumed that other people would be going, but after talking to my friends at the time and my classmates, and no one really seeming to be particularly interested in what I was talking about, I kind of came to the conclusion that, yeah, I would just have to walk out of school on my own. And I didn't really mind, but it was a bit disconcerting to do it all alone. And at that point, the narrative that I think I'd subconsciously internalized from teachers, politicians, my peers, the media, and just the world around me was that young people are apathetic, that they don't care about politics, they don't care about climate change, they don't want to vote, that they're self-centered and they only care about themselves. And I don't know how many Instagram followers they have, like some trivial thing like that. But I realize now that, yeah, I did kind of believe that. And because of that, I figured, oh, I must just be a bit different. I must be a bit of an anomaly, which made sense at the time because at school, I'd always had this reputation of being the person who did these slightly geeky, slightly out there, slightly rebellious things. So although by the day of the strike, most of my classmates and friends knew that I would be going, no one was really surprised. Yeah, and as it turned out, when the day of the strike did come, I wasn't quite as unique, as much of an anomaly as I'd thought. And so I ended up arriving there with a few other students who I didn't really know. But wow, that first moment when I was stood there, it genuinely, it left me speechless. And that doesn't really happen that often to me, as you might be able to tell. So I was standing in this crowd of young people, screaming in a shared outrage at our futures being stolen from us. It was one of the most, I think, profound and memorable moments of my life, and I think it still is. And I just couldn't believe that I'd listened to this kind of societal message that young people are selfish and uninterested, because from where I was stood, it didn't seem like that. And I suppose it sounds kind of cliche, doesn't it, to say that I felt empowered. And those words, like, they do get thrown around a lot, especially around women. But in that moment when I was stood there, I really did kind of find out what it felt to feel empowered, in the sense that before that experience, I had felt powerless. I'd felt like there was nothing I could do and there was not really any point. But after that, it allowed me to become aware of my power, and also as an individual, but also young people's collective power to make a change. And that was a new feeling for me, but it was the beginning of my, yeah, you could say my journey of learning the skills of how I could use my power to help solve the climate crisis. So that was how it started. But I want to tell you a bit about how it's going, so you have a bit of context and what kind of thing I get up to. So as I said, that moment was the beginning of a whole new chapter of my life. It really did change my life a lot. And from then on, I got involved with the organization of the strikes. I attended the first meetings, and then after the meetings, it kind of led on to the leafleting drives, the marches, and the banner drops, and all those kind of events. And in the most wonderful way possible, I just got sucked into the world of climate activism and youth empowerment, and it was just amazing. So after being involved in Youth Strike from March to about December 2019, I've taken part in various other environmentalist programs, courses and campaigns. So for example, I travelled to London and also Manchester to be part of the civil disobedience that I was mentioning with Extinction Rebellion. I completed a one-year environmental leadership course run by the Centre for Sustainable Energy. That was really great. I attended a series of workshops specifically for young women in sustainability. That was really enlightening. And I've also travelled to Germany and to Brussels to take part in climate activism camps for youth on the train. I didn't fly. Yeah, and I've also recently led a workshop around group-centred decision-making aimed at activists. So that's the kind of thing, yeah. And it sounds like a lot. When I kind of say all that, it does sound like a lot. And it has been a lot emotionally and like physically just like challenging. But I don't want to just be like, oh, these are the things I've done, here's this big long list, because I don't really think that's particularly helpful to anyone. Yeah, I don't think that's particularly helpful or encouraging. So instead, what I want to talk about is the behind the scenes of those kind of accomplishments and why I do what I'm doing, how I keep going even when it's difficult, and also what I've learned, because those are the kinds of questions that are more useful. So I want to kind of talk about essentially the framework on which these achievements and projects and campaigns are built, and the stuff that allows me to get this stuff done, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. I want to get back to basics first. So basics would be, why do I do this? And in other words, this is what inspires me. So for this question, I definitely at first had the knee-jerk reaction of feeling like I should talk about the polar bears or the melting ice caps or the sixth mass extinction or soil erosion, the acidification of the oceans, deforestation, coral reef bleaching, that kind of thing. But once I sat back and and thought about it for a second, I realized that these things, they don't really inspire me. They're the reason I care, but they're not what's going to motivate me to, I don't know, run a meeting or to answer my emails or get out of bed so I can complete my project. What actually does inspire me are the things which are a bit closer to home, the small successes and the people around me. One major inspiration is looking back on the progress we've made. And one thing about progress, which I think is important that I've learned, is I think it can be really helpful to see progress as a wide net rather than a tick box exercise. So for example, to put that into context, for me, I used to try and do way too many things at once, and then I'd end up doing none of them particularly well. But I've made progress and I've learned to prioritize, which is something I'm definitely still learning. It does take a while. So now I try and do a few things and I do them well. Well, I try and do them well. And that's how I've made progress on an individual level. Or you can also make progress as part of a group. So for example, when I was a member of Youth Strike for Climate Sheffield, we always made sure to make that each strike was a little bit better than the last. So we might run it more smoothly. Maybe if the tech wasn't working, we'd try and improve that. Maybe we'd do a few more leafleting drives to see if we could drive up the turnout, just so that in some way each strike was better and more effective than the last one, most of the time. So yeah, you can make progress as part of a group, or like I said, you can see progress on a much wider scale. So one thing that I always come back to when people ask me, so what impact have the youth strikers had in Britain or Extinction Rebellion? Because this is a question that I do get asked quite a lot, and also that I ask myself quite a lot, because you want to think that you've made an impact. It's really important. So the thing that I come back to most of the time is the 2019 general election debate on Channel 4 about climate change. So I don't know whether you saw this, but I was really, really excited for this, because I think it's not something that would have been in the realm of possibility, I feel, if it weren't for the Fridays for Future movement and Extinction Rebellion and lots of other people's kind of collective endeavour. Yeah, it just wouldn't have been something that I think Channel 4 would have seen as worthy of having a debate on, something that people might watch. But after those kind of movements, I think it was. So we literally raised the awareness of the issue, and the debate was one of the tangible impacts of that. And that's another point. I think it's really important, because in things like social movements, whenever you're trying to make a big, wide-ranging, maybe slightly vague change in the world, it can be really hard to draw. I mean, it's almost impossible to draw a line between one event trying to make a change and one change in the law, or one change in social, like in people's attitudes that you might see in a survey, anything like that. It's just so difficult to draw the line. So I think one thing that's really, really important is to just take ownership of the things that have changed and just give yourself a bit of credit. Sometimes it's really important. Yeah, so that's one thing that inspires me. Another thing that also inspires me a lot is, of course, other people. So this is so many different people and so many different places, but people I collaborate with, it can be them, people I see on social media, people who attended the strikes when we had them, the people I mentor, the people who mentor me, and obviously my incredible friends. They inspire me a lot. I think I have a massively increased respect than I ever did before for people who work in teams and people who are engaged with their issue, and also anyone challenging stereotypes or prejudice, because I think my just respect and admiration for that just stepped up a whole new level once this was something that I was trying to do myself actively as well. Because once I'd learned how frustrating it can be and how hard it can be to navigate these kind of things, and how difficult it can be to pick yourself back up when it doesn't go well, now every time I see someone else do that, it gives me a little boost of energy and motivation and drive to keep going. And because I surround myself with these people, I'm constantly getting these little boosts, and that's one of the main things that actually keeps me going day to day on like an everyday scale. Yeah, that's especially even more the case when it comes to my friends and my support network, because the thing about them is I know them, right? I know them really well. So I know that they have good days, they have bad days, same as me. They celebrate their little wins, but sometimes they feel overwhelmed, and sometimes they cry just like me and just like anyone that you could think of, any human ever. So when I'm feeling a bit demotivated and maybe not as inspired, I think to myself, if they can be incredible and successful and creative and kind, all in their own unique ways, whilst also being normal people who have to deal with and struggle with the challenges of everyday life. So I think to myself, if they can do it, then so can I, and so can anyone. Yeah. So this actually leads me on to the question, what am I most proud of? And again, with this question, it took me a bit of a while to think of something to say about what I'm proud of, because probably I think that's because I'm most often focused on what I can aim for next rather than what I've already achieved. So I also had the urge to name one specific event or one specific accomplishment. But again, when I thought it through a bit more, I realized that the thing that I'm definitely most proud of, above any one event or kind of project or anything like that, is just keeping going when it was difficult. Because there's been a lot of times when it has been difficult, like most of the time it's difficult, and it would have been so easy and so inviting just to give up. And keeping going a lot of the time feels like a kind of uphill battle against a tide of schoolwork, stress, constant depressing news stories that happens a lot, other commitments, not knowing what to do, wondering if I'm doing something useful, or doubting if anything I do even has an impact, agonizing over if I come across badly or wrong, missed opportunities, exhaustion, fear of failure, perfectionism, getting things wrong, wondering if the people who criticize me are right. So in the face of all these challenges, I think what I'm most proud of is just that I'm still doing it, like I'm still going, even though it's hard a lot of the time. Thank you. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is something that Nelson Mandela, I think, put into words a lot better than I can. So I'll just read this quote from him. And he said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fail." So I'm proud that I keep rising every time I fail. And that's what I'm proud of. So yeah, that's a good segue, I think, into the next question of, have I encountered challenges on my campaign journey? And the answer to that is clearly yes. Yes, I have lots of challenges. This didn't take me long to think of, and it's similar to the last one, but a little bit different, in that my main challenge has been keeping up my momentum, and mainly finding and also making time for and energy for the right opportunities, because I'm a person who I need quite a lot of structure in my life. I like to take an approach of little and often, and if something is going to get done by me well, then it needs to be scheduled and prepared for. It all needs to be very organized. And so it's been a challenge for me to find new opportunities once the ones I've been doing previously have finished. And so that I'm kind of constantly doing my little bit to help fight climate change. And yeah, keyword is help, because no one can do it on their own, obviously. So yeah, that's been a challenge because it is very easy to let other commitments take over. For example, for me, that would mainly be my education. I'm in my last year of school, I'm doing A-levels. There's just so much work, and it would be kind of the default would be to just let the work expand and take up all my time and energy and not really leave room for anything else. And I think, yeah, it can be difficult because especially if you're a student or if you have a job or just any kind of commitment that's maybe more mainstream and not seen as like an extra, it can be very difficult because you're constantly given opportunities to have a higher and higher workload. And so I found that you have to really, really, really be active in not allowing these things to expand into and take over the time, and also the energy that you need to campaign and to be an activist, any kind of activist. And as well as finding these opportunities at all, I've also found it difficult to find the right ones. It's been a challenge because you can clearly only contribute to relatively a very small piece of the puzzle. If you think about the massive, massive, wide-reaching problem that covers every continent, every person, every aspect of life, which is climate change or ecological breakdown, I think for me, that means it's all the more important to be contributing in a way which works for you. And what I mainly mean by that is something that plays into your strengths. So like strengths-based leadership is kind of important. For example, like I said, I'm quite an organized person. I'm a very organized person. And so for me, it's really important to find things which allow me to come up with systems and structures to make them work better, because that's just what I'm good at. And also communication, that's another one of my strengths. There are some things I'm not so good at, but communication is something that I feel like I am quite good at. So I think for me, it's really important to find opportunities which require me to express myself and my ideas and my experience and share and connect with other people, because I know that's something I can do well. So you want to think about what you can do so that it fulfills your strengths and you can be doing something you're good at, but you also want to think about how you work best. I think that's equally as important. So questions that you might want to ask yourself are, do you prefer to work in a team, or are you more effective working on your own? Do you prefer to have weekly commitments, a regular commitment, or do you like to be more spontaneous with when you work? Do you need a role where you can take the lead? Are you a good leader? Or do you really need a role where there's going to be clear instruction and you know what's kind of in your role? Or do you want something that's a clearly defined goal, or something where you can take it in your own direction and you have a bit of creative freedom? These are really important questions, in my view, to ask yourself when you're considering a new opportunity or a new role. Obviously, clearly nothing is ever going to be perfect, nothing ever is, but how I see it, how you approach activism should be how you approach any other area of your life. And really, you should really give some thought to making it fulfilling and also effective. And alongside that, remembering to be kind to yourself and be proud that you're doing something to make the world a better place, which I think is all anyone can really aim for. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Polly. And that was such a great point to end on as well, is that if you're doing something to make the world a better place, that's a fantastic thing to aim for. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, definitely. So we're going to open it up now to attendees to write in the chat or in the Q&A box if you've got any questions for Polly, and myself, Mia and Steph will ask them. I know it's always like hard when you've like listened to something, you're like, oh, what do I ask? I've got loads of things I want to say, but I don't know what. So whilst people are thinking, I wrote down a couple of things from when you were speaking, Polly, and it really resonated, I think, when you said at the start about it almost feeling like it was only you, like in your school when the youth strikes were happening. How did you sort of overcome those feelings of, oh no, am I the only one who wants to make a change around this? Was there sort of a moment that made you overcome it, or?
I think that was something that I just had to see for myself. I just had to go and see that I wasn't the only one, because I think it can seem like you're the only one, especially when maybe you're in an environment where you're just not seeing the people who are the other people who care. Because I think there were a lot of people who cared, who I met, and then a lot of them are my friends now who I've met through the strikes, but maybe in my school there weren't as many. So I think the best way to overcome that is to first believe that like there are other people, because you're never going to be the only one, but just to find those people who have your shared values. And I think you will find them. You just have to show yourself that they're there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to pass over to Mia to ask the first question from the Q&A box.
Yeah. So Jasmine has asked, how do you take care of your mental health while you're trying to fit in campaigning as well as your schoolwork?
That's a really good question. So I think the main way is I kind of make it quite clear to myself, because with schoolwork, there's kind of a teacher who's telling you this is what you need to do, this is how much you need to do. So the boundaries are kind of already set there for you. But I think it's important to kind of transfer that also onto your activism. So maybe choose one thing, one campaign that you're going to focus on that you know is like manageable, and just do that rather than leaving it that too open so that you can easily get overwhelmed. Because the worst thing is to commit to too many things, and then that's when it gets stressful. Whereas if you just commit to the one thing, then you know. And also just knowing what kind of calms you down, relaxes you, so that even when it is stressful, because things are always going to get a bit stressful, you know what works for you. So for example, I really like working out, helps me with my stress, or just any kind of exercise is good anyway. And I also really like journaling, so that I can kind of deal with the things that I'm stressed about, like they're going in my journal, like I know that I can think about them, but just in that kind of allotted time where I'm going to be journaling, so they don't just like float around in my brain stressing me out. So yeah.
Thank you. And Steph, would you like to ask the next question?
Okay, so Ash asked, in what ways has activism impacted your life that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I think it's I knew that I wanted to get into activism to help. I suppose it is helping me in an indirect way, because it's not good for anyone if all our ecosystems collapse. But I think I didn't expect it to have such a profound impact on my own personal well-being, and my quality of life. So for example, there are so many elements it's like given me that are so important for well-being, like a purpose. I'm doing something that I know that I think is important, and all the research shows that that's just really like integral to happiness, contentment. Close friends, like I mentioned, my closest friends, I met them through activism, and I didn't expect that I would form such close friendships when I went into it. Also a community, that's also really important. So people who maybe I don't know them that well, like we're not best friends, but I know that we've got something in common and we're all on the same side. And also an opportunity to go outside of my comfort zone. I suppose I never thought it all through. I just went to the strike, and I didn't realize what a big beginning it would be for me. But it's given me such an opportunity to expand my skill set outside of academic things and into other areas. So yeah.
Thank you. So but the next question is, have you got any advice for people who are just starting out with activism and might be feeling overwhelmed? And then they've said in brackets, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Oh, can you hear my dog?
It's fine, mine will start soon as well.
But, that's a good question. I think probably the main one would be if anyone tells you that you're being unrealistic or like utopian, or your goals are like too high, like they're never ever going to happen, the change that you want is just never going to happen, you might as well not try. If anyone tells you that, just completely ignore them, because anyone who has achieved any kind of big important social change, be it, I don't know, civil rights, gender equality, gay rights, like anything like that, have always been told that they're being unrealistic. So just, if anyone tells you that, just nod, smile politely, and just completely ignore them. That would be my main bit.
Fab, thank you. Back to Mia.
Yeah. Oh. Sorry. So the next question is from Jasmine. So what do you see yourself doing next, or like your next steps in what you're doing?
Yeah, my next steps. Well, at the moment I have a job, just like a part-time job, mentoring. So I did a year-long sustainable leadership course, and I have a part-time job at the moment mentoring the people who are in the next year of that course. So I'm definitely going to carry on doing that, because that's been really rewarding. And as for my next steps, I think I just might need to see where it takes me, because I'm going to do more of running an environmental debate club that I'm doing at the moment, so that should be great. But I think I need to reevaluate, because A-levels are coming soon, so I'm going to need to see what I want to do next. So basically, not entirely sure. I'm going to go with the flow and see what I can take on alongside my A-levels when the workload gets a bit more, so that I'm not too overwhelmed.
Definitely. So Steph, would you like to ask the next question?
So this one's from Mona, and she says, you've mentioned the need for decision-based leadership. What strategies when it comes to decision making work for you?
That's a good question. So I did just do a workshop on this yesterday. So what strategies work for me? So I think when you're making any kind of decision, there's a few different ways that you can go about it, but all of them, making decisions in groups is difficult, but it's also really important, because as I said, you can't do anything on your own. So you're always going to need to make decisions in groups. It's just inevitable. And I think really important when you're making decisions in groups is that you make sure that everyone's voice gets heard. And I know that that sounds a bit basic, but sometimes you need to go a bit further and just make sure you put in some procedures, some kind of elements to make sure that even people who don't feel as confident expressing their views get to have their views taken into consideration, because otherwise the people who are more confident will end up making all the decisions, and you're just going to miss out on really valuable input from people just because they didn't have as much confidence. So I think that's the main really important thing when you're making any kind of group decision making. And also, if you have a leader, it's really important that everyone trusts that leader and that they're chosen for a good reason. So those would be the main things, because it is difficult making decisions in groups.
Thanks, Polly. So we've got another question from Ash, is what was the most fulfilling moment in your activism journey so far?
That's also a really good question. I think fulfilling, I think probably mentoring my mentees at the moment has been really fulfilling, because I think it's what is the kind of saying, you can understand something, but then once you can teach it, you know that you understand it well. So I think it's very rewarding and fulfilling to be able to not exactly teach, I'm not just telling them stuff that they should listen to, it's more of a discussion, but to feel like you can guide someone is really fulfilling, because it's really fulfilling to know that of everything you've learned, you now have something valuable to pass on to other people. And that's made me feel really fulfilled and kind of satisfied with where I'm at.
Awesome. It's sort of sharing that knowledge that you've got and passing that on as well to others is, yeah, definitely sounds very fulfilling. Mia, back to you.
Yeah. This is a nightmare. So the next question is, do you struggle with wanting to advocate for multiple things?
Yeah, I think I do. Well, I think my kind of activist journey kind of had a very definite beginning and it's still ongoing. And I think the main reason that I'm kind of a climate activist, because I don't do that much activism for other causes, even though I obviously care about them, I think is because that opportunity was there. So I kind of, and then things grew from there. But I do struggle with that because sometimes I do think, is this the issue that I should be focusing on? Are other issues maybe more important or maybe more relevant at the moment? So I do struggle with that. But the reason I think I stick with climate activism is because I can't remember who it was who said it, but some climate activist at some point has said, and I think other people have changed it and done different versions with it, but said when people talk about the economy being more important than the climate, they've said there's no jobs on a dead planet. So if the climate all like goes wrong and all the ecosystems break down, there's no point in having an economy. And that's kind of how I feel. Like I think all these other issues are important. So that's why I'm a climate activist, so that we can have an alive, functioning planet to improve. Yeah.
That's a really good answer. I think that's something we've discussed with Gen Z, is everyone's so passionate about making change in so many different places. It's where do I start almost? But just because you're focusing on one thing, like you said, doesn't mean you don't care about those other things. But you've got to sort of focus your energies in one place. So I've got another question actually, would be, you spoke about other previous campaigns sort of maybe being told, oh, you're being too utopian, you're too, it's too out of reach. What is your sort of one, if there is just one, it might be multiple, but big sort of utopian goal? If you could just click your fingers and that thing happened or that thing changed, what would that be?
Oh my goodness.
Such a big question, sorry. You could do multiple things.
Yeah. I think if everyone, maybe something that's slightly related, I think if everyone felt like they could make a difference, oh, it sounds so cheesy, but it's true. But if everyone felt like they could make a difference, I think that'd be massive, because then all these things that people do care about and they do think about, like anything you can imagine, any issue that you could imagine, I think if people knew that they could make a difference, even if it's small, then I think the world would be a better place, because people would be more inspired to take action. And if everyone was taking action to create good change in the world, then that would be an amazing world to live in.
Absolutely. That was a really good answer to I'm really sorry, a really tricky question. I didn't realise it was so hard. As I was saying it, I was like, oh no. Steph, back to you. There's another question in the question box.
Yeah, so Jasmine asked, how do you deal with criticism?
How do I deal with criticism? I don't know how much kind of direct criticism of me I've necessarily received. I don't think I've received that much. I think if I was more active on like social media, I probably would have. But I think sometimes you can be criticized as part of a like group. So like climate activists are often criticized for various things, or young people, or I don't know, any of the groups that I'd be a part of. I think it helps to have a good support network, so that if you're dealing with any kind of criticism, you have people around you who can kind of, even if you know that you're doing the right thing or you believe in what you're doing, it's always really helpful to have people around you to support you and like reassure you. And also just kind of building up that like self-belief, which also sounds cringy, but it's also true. So just building up that self-belief so that you can get to a point where you know that you're doing what you think is right, and that's kind of enough so that you're feeling like grounded, so people can say like whatever they want, but you kind of know like more deeply than that that's what you feel is the right thing. So, but it's quite difficult, but I think that's important.
Thank you. Sorry, I just muted myself. I think Steph might have a question now.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, because for me, I have a few ways that I wanted to campaign, because I know there's so many different ways. So which ones have you found most effective?
Which ones have I found most effective? So yeah, like you said, there are a lot of ways, and I feel like I have done a few different ways. So direct action would be with Extinction Rebellion, so like blocking the roads or like blocking coal mines, that kind of thing. And I think that can be effective because if you can get your message across so that people, for example, a lot of the Extinction Rebellion protesters were like arrested. So that's with the aim of like getting your point across about how important this is, that you're willing to like risk kind of your freedom. So I think that can be effective for showing people how important an issue is, direct action. But I think also having conversations with people around you can also be very effective, because it's a lot more, I feel like it's a lot more powerful to hear a message from someone you know and you trust. You're more likely to listen to that. But I think probably what I would say the most effective thing is, and what you can see kind of throughout history has been effective, is just kind of, what's the phrase, getting people like on the ground, like getting people marching. I think it's just tried and tested. A lot of like most successful movements have involved that. And I think that can be really effective, because especially when nowadays it's so easy to just tweet something or do something on social media, which is great. But I think it's a whole new level to actually go out, especially when it's cold, it's rainy, and you spend ages making your sign and then maybe it gets ruined. But like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's very, I think that can be effective just because it shows the commitment. But I think the whole point is there's so many different ways that can be effective. So I think you just got to find the one that works for you.
It's like taking that multi-pronged approach, like then people can't ignore you. Just be there. Thank you so much, Polly. I think that might be all the questions. So I've just got one sort of final one which kind of wraps things up. But what sort of practical steps do you think other young people could take to get involved with the climate activism movement?
So I think a really good step would be joining a local group. So you could there's a lot of groups that are like friends of different green spaces. They can be really good, because I suppose that's more practical and less campaigny, but those can be really good to kind of get a network and join one of those groups. Also Extinction Rebellion, they have a lot of groups as well, and Youth Strike for Climate still have a lot of groups. So I think joining some kind of group or doing some kind of course, just something to like get you involved in it so you can learn a bit more, is a really good practical step. And maybe also, if you have a specific aspect of the climate crisis, because there's so many different aspects, if you have a specific aspect like, I don't know, planting trees or marine conservation or decarbonizing energy, something like that, finding something that you're really passionate about, that can be really useful as well. But I think the main thing is to just get involved, and it doesn't have to be the thing you want to do in the long run, but just get involved so that you've got people around you who have been doing it, and you can just start, and then things will open up a bit more from there, or at least in my experience.
Definitely, it's that really, again, really cheesy saying, but like the journey of 1,000 steps starts with one single step. So it's, yeah, getting yourself out there and joining something and, yeah, making that commitment. Thank you so much, Polly, for coming along today. And that was really, really good, really inspiring. I've definitely learned a lot today. People in the chat are now saying thank you, which is always nice. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, Mia, Steph, do you want to say anything?
think I just want to say like thank you, because especially with you being like a similar age to a lot of the people that are in the Gen Z as well, I think it's really inspiring to see like how far you can get at such a young age. And like, just thanks for coming and just like speaking to us all, because I think I can speak for everyone when I say it was really interesting and really inspiring for us all to hear.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah. So I was waiting to see if Steph was going to unmute, but I'm not sure. No, you don't have to, lovely.
Oh, sorry, she took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the exact same thing. It was definitely really
I have
inspiring.
a habit of doing that.
I think definitely for me, because I want to do more about the climate change. So the fact that there's so many different ways to do it, and that to have someone here to kind of give us that advice is just so helpful and so inspiring. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So what I'm just doing very quickly is I've just got a quick evaluation form that I'm going to just pop into the chat for everyone, and if everyone could just take, I think it takes about 3 minutes just to fill that in, just on how you found the webinar this evening, that would be amazing. So I'll pop that in the chat now. But yeah, thank you so much, Polly, and I'm sure we will see more of you soon in the future.
Hopefully.
Grand. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely rest of week. Bye.